Ladies and gentlemen, imagine for a moment that you are an ancient soldier standing before an enemy fortress. You see no army, hear no horns of war, yet on the towering gates above you, strange emblems are carved into the stone. Serpents with twisted tongues, all-seeing eyes, beasts with unholy wings. These, you know instinctively, are not mere decorations. They are banners of dominion. They declare ownership. They are warnings. But what if I told you that such symbols have not been left in the ruins of old empires, nor buried in forgotten scrolls, but are alive and well today, embedded not in stone, but in the logos of modern corporations? What if the banners of the enemy were being flown not above dark fortresses, but in your homes, your streets, and even in the very things you wear and consume? I do not say this to invoke paranoia, but to stir awareness. The world we live in is not merely a place of economic exchanges and harmless competition, but a battlefield of allegiances. And symbols, those silent but potent messengers, carry meaning whether we acknowledge it or not. Let us then examine 5 such symbols, which appear in modern brands, and consider whether they serve the good, the neutral, or the adversary. The serpent has always been a teacher of subtlety. It does not charge, nor roar, nor force, but whispers. Many modern brands employ the imagery of the serpent, coiled, striking, or disguised within other shapes. It represents cunning, control, and the ancient deception first whispered in the garden, "You shall be as gods." Look closely at the branding that encourages self-worship, absolute autonomy, and moral fluidity. Do they not echo the same promise? There exists a peculiar fascination with the symbol of an ever-watching eye. It appears in corporate logos, subtly hidden in patterns, or proudly displayed in the open. While the eye can represent wisdom, in darker contexts it signifies surveillance, control, and an aspiration to godlike omniscience. In ancient days, tyrants set statues of themselves in city centers to remind their subjects that they were always watching. Today, the emblem of the all-seeing eye still whispers the same message. The cross, that symbol of salvation and sacrifice, has been twisted into perversions, sometimes inverted, sometimes broken, sometimes shattered into meaningless abstraction. We find its distorted reflections in fashion brands, entertainment industries, and even products marketed as edgy or rebellious. But rebellion against what? When something strikes at the heart of the cross, we must ask whether its aim is merely artistic or deeply adversarial. Symbols of the goat-headed figure, whose meanings range from arcane knowledge to outright mockery of divine order, are now emblazoned on clothing, entertainment, and corporate logos. Sometimes they appear subtly, 2 small horns rising in a letter's curve, or a shadowy figure blended into a design. Other times they are blatant. The world, once scandalized by such images, now wears them as fashion. If a man drapes himself in the banner of darkness, can he truly claim to be walking in the light? Some symbols are less pictorial and more numerical, 3 sixes entwined in a swirling design, hidden in the curves of a brand's lettering, or appearing in repetitive sequences. These are not placed without intent. The adversary delights in mockery, and if he can turn his number into a spectacle that people laugh at, so much the better. But make no mistake, numbers, like words, like symbols, carry power. Symbols have always held an intrinsic power, woven deeply into the fabric of human civilization. They are more than mere artistic expressions or marketing tools. They are conveyors of meaning, carriers of ancient truths or ancient lies. The world is not a mere stage of random occurrences, nor is human culture shaped by blind chance. Every empire, every ideology, every movement throughout history has been marked by its symbols. The Romans had their eagle, the Greeks their laurel wreath, the early Christians their fish. These emblems did not merely identify a people, they shaped their perceptions, their allegiances, and their understanding of the world. To think, therefore, that the symbols that saturate our modern landscape on clothing, technology, entertainment, and commerce are devoid of significance would be a grave mistake. If an ancient civilization used symbols to declare their gods and their values, what makes us think that the same is not happening today? In a world where ideas compete for dominance, symbols act as silent ambassadors of ideologies. They communicate messages faster than words and are often designed with meticulous care to evoke subconscious reactions. Consider, for example, the swastika. Before it was ever co-opted by Nazi Germany, it was a sacred symbol in several ancient cultures, representing auspiciousness and good fortune. Yet within a single generation it became an undeniable emblem of tyranny and evil. The meaning of a symbol, therefore, is not fixed in time, but is shaped by those who wield it. Corporations, governments, and movements understand this well, which is why branding and imagery are so heavily studied and refined. A well-placed logo can shape public perception, stir emotions, and even foster loyalty in ways that are barely perceptible to the average consumer. Symbols, then, are not merely neutral designs. They are tools of influence, carefully crafted to embed themselves in the human psyche. Furthermore, the spiritual weight of symbols cannot be ignored. Throughout history, pagan religions have invoked symbols as channels of power, gateways to their deities or to forces beyond human comprehension. The pentagram, the ankh, the Ouroboros, each of these had significance beyond their aesthetic appeal. They were used in rituals, engraved into temples, and passed down through generations as carriers of esoteric knowledge. If such symbols bore meaning in the past, what reason do we have to believe that they are meaningless today? Have we, in our modern arrogance, decided that we are beyond the realm of spiritual influence? The enemy has never abandoned his tactics. He has merely adapted them. Instead of erecting statues in temples, he has learned to brand them onto products, to disguise them in marketing campaigns, and to saturate the world with his marks, all under the guise of mere creativity or corporate identity. When we begin to understand that symbols are never truly neutral, we start to see the world differently. We recognize that behind every widely adopted emblem, there is a purpose, an agenda, a guiding philosophy. This does not mean we must become paranoid, seeing demons in every corner, but it does mean we must be discerning. If a symbol appears repeatedly across multiple brands, industries, and movements, especially those that seem to oppose traditional morality or promote self-worship, it is worth asking, who does this symbol serve? What is its fruit? For a banner always belongs to a kingdom, and every kingdom has a ruler. The question we must ask ourselves is whether we are aligning ourselves, consciously or unconsciously, under the wrong banner. From the very beginning of human history, the serpent has been a symbol of deception, cunning, and rebellion against divine order. It slithered into the sacred garden, not with a roar or a show of brute force, but with a whisper. This is the nature of its influence. It does not attack openly, but persuades subtly, enticing its prey with half-truths wrapped in eloquence. When it spoke to Eve, it did not demand her disobedience. It merely suggested a different perspective. Did God really say? It is a question designed not to provoke, but to plant doubt. It is a strategy that has not changed through the centuries. Today, that same deception is alive and well, manifesting in ways that the unsuspecting pass off as harmless, even fashionable. And nowhere is this more evident than in the branding and marketing strategies of major corporations, where serpentine imagery is often hidden in plain sight. The presence of the serpent in modern brands is not a coincidence. Whether coiled around a staff, intertwined with letters, or subtly embedded in abstract logos, the imagery persists. Some companies openly incorporate it into their design, while others embed its form more subtly, perhaps within the curve of a letter, the elongated shape of a design, or even within an animalistic theme that evokes the same primal cunning. What is most concerning is not simply the use of the snake itself, but the philosophies that these brands promote. Many of them, rather than merely selling a product, sell an idea, a worldview that closely mirrors the ancient lie spoken in Eden: you shall be as gods. They preach self-worship, unchecked autonomy, and the rejection of objective morality, urging people to cast aside traditional constraints and live their truth, no matter how detached from reality that truth may be. This alignment with the serpent's deception is not accidental. Large-scale marketing campaigns often employ psychological strategies designed to appeal to base desires: power, pleasure, control, and self-glorification. They craft their messages with precision, using phrases like "rule your world," "obey your thirst," "just do it," and other slogans that subtly echo the serpent's original temptation. These messages appeal to the pride of life, urging people to make themselves the center of their existence. But what is most insidious about this messaging is that it often goes unnoticed. The enemy does not need to convince people to worship him outright. He only needs to convince them to worship themselves. If he can shift their focus from the divine to the self, he has already won a significant battle. And so, the question must be asked, is it mere coincidence that so many brands incorporate serpentine imagery and philosophy into their design? Are these simply aesthetic choices, or is there something deeper at work? It would be naive to assume that billion-dollar corporations, which spend vast sums of money on research into human psychology, are unaware of the power of symbolism. If the serpent's deception was potent enough to alter the course of human history, why would we assume it is not still at work today? The symbols we see around us are not merely decorations, they are messages. And the message of the serpent has always been the same: you do not need God. You can be your own. Since ancient times, the symbol of an all-seeing eye has been associated with divine knowledge, hidden wisdom, and an omnipresent force that watches over humanity. Civilizations long past carved it into their temples, painted it onto their sacred scrolls. The Egyptians adorned their monuments with the Eye of Horus, believing it granted protection and insight. Other cultures saw it as a representation of hidden truths, of knowledge reserved for the initiated few. But while the concept of an all-seeing eye has existed for millennia, it has taken on a darker form in the modern world. No longer simply a symbol of divine oversight, it has been repurposed into an emblem of surveillance, control, and manipulation. Today it appears in the logos of corporations, financial institutions, and media conglomerates, entities that seek to shape public perception, dictate behavior, and monitor individuals with an ever-present, silent gaze. The unsettling reality is that the modern world is increasingly defined by this notion of constant surveillance. What was once the paranoid fear of dystopian fiction has become an accepted aspect of daily life. Cameras are embedded into every street corner, every store, every device. Social media platforms track our habits. Corporations analyze our data, and governments expand their watchful reach, all under the guise of convenience and security. And yet, even as people grow aware of this intrusion, they seem powerless to resist it. They continue to engage with the very systems that monitor them, willingly trading privacy for comfort, personal autonomy for digital ease. The all-seeing eye, which once represented divine wisdom, now represents a far more sinister form of knowledge, the kind that does not seek to enlighten but to control. What makes this symbol particularly dangerous is the illusion it fosters. It presents itself as a benevolent force, watching over humanity for its own good. The companies that incorporate the all-seeing eye into their branding do not explicitly claim malice. They promise connection, innovation, and progress. The institutions that monitor and track individuals do not openly declare their desire for control. They claim it is for security, efficiency, and customization. But behind this carefully crafted narrative lies a deeper reality, one that echoes the same ancient temptation whispered in the garden. Just as the serpent promised knowledge that would make humanity like God, so too does the modern surveillance state offer knowledge that grants power over others. But this knowledge is not freely given. It comes at the cost of submission. Those who wield the all-seeing eye do not do so to uplift, but to dominate. And so, the question must be asked, why has this symbol become so prevalent in the modern world? Is it simply a relic of ancient mysticism, repurposed for contemporary aesthetics, or does it carry a more deliberate message? The repetition of this emblem across industries is no accident. It signals an agenda, one that seeks to replace divine authority with human oversight, to shift power from the heavens into the hands of corporations and governing bodies. The all-seeing eye, in its current form, is no longer a symbol of divine vision, but of worldly surveillance. It does not watch with love, as a creator watches over his creation, but with calculation, as a master watches over his subjects. The question is not whether this symbol exists, but rather, to whom does it belong? The cross has stood as the ultimate symbol of sacrifice, redemption, and divine love. It is the mark of Christ's victory over sin and death, the very emblem of hope for those who seek salvation. For centuries it has been revered, feared, and even hated, but never ignored. The cross divides history, separates the believer from the unbeliever, and draws a clear line between the kingdom of God and the forces that oppose it. Yet, in the modern world, the cross has not merely been dismissed or rejected. It has been twisted, inverted, and broken. It is no longer just removed from public spaces. It is distorted and repurposed in ways that mock its true meaning. What was once a sign of ultimate love has become in many cases a tool of rebellion, subversion, and even blasphemy. We see this distortion in fashion, in entertainment, and in branding, where the cross is no longer displayed as a sign of faith, but as a symbol of defiance. The inverted cross, once used by early Christian martyrs as a sign of humility, has been hijacked by those who seek to subvert the faith. It appears in music videos, on clothing, and in the imagery of brands that wish to appear edgy or rebellious. But what exactly is being rebelled against? If a company places an inverted or broken cross in its design, it is not merely rejecting organized religion, it is symbolically rejecting Christ himself. The world does not wage war against vague spirituality. It wages war against one name, one truth, one Lord. The mockery of the cross is not incidental. It is intentional. Even beyond outright inversion, there is a subtler distortion of the cross that is just as dangerous. Many brands incorporate it in fragmented, fractured forms, turning it into a meaningless design rather than a sacred symbol. It is reshaped into abstract patterns, stripped of its original significance, and repackaged as just another aesthetic choice. This is a tactic far more effective than direct opposition, for it does not attack the cross outright, but renders it irrelevant. In this way, the world does not need to convince people to hate Christianity. It only needs to make them indifferent to it. A cross that means nothing is just as useful to the enemy as a cross that is despised. If he can turn the sacred into the trivial, he has already won half the battle. Thus, the question is not only why the cross is being distorted, but why it is being targeted at all. Why not the symbols of other religions? Why not the emblems of other faiths? The answer is simple: because the cross holds power. It is a reminder of a reality that the world wishes to forget, that there is a higher authority than the corporations, the celebrities, the governments, and the ideologies that seek to rule us. A true cross points not to the self, but to the Saviour. A distorted cross points to nothing at all. And in a world where people are being subtly led away from the truth, a meaningless cross is exactly what the enemy desires. Numbers like symbols have always carried meaning. They are not merely arbitrary figures used for measurement, but in many cases they convey deeper truths, spiritual realities, and hidden messages. The Bible is filled with numbers that signify divine order: 7 representing completion, 12 symbolizing governance, and 40 marking periods of testing and transformation. But just as numbers can reflect divine truth, they can also be twisted to represent rebellion. And no number carries this weight more than 666, the infamous mark of the beast. It is a number that has fascinated, terrified, and intrigued people for centuries. Some dismiss it as superstition, others sensationalize it in media and fiction, but few stop to ask, why does this number appear so frequently in branding, logos, and corporate symbolism? Is it mere coincidence, or does it serve a purpose greater than what is immediately visible? The presence of 666 in modern brands is not a matter of happenstance. It appears in stylized logos, embedded within barcodes, subtly included in advertising campaigns, and even reflected in the pricing structures of products. At times it is overt, with companies incorporating 666 patterns directly into their imagery. Other times it is more covert, hidden within designs in ways that are only noticeable upon closer inspection. Skeptics might argue that these instances are purely coincidental or simply artistic choices, yet it is difficult to ignore the frequency and persistence of this number in industries that shape culture, influence minds, and dictate trends. If corporations spend billions on branding and marketing, carefully selecting every curve and line in their logos, would they truly be careless in their choice of numerical representation? It is unlikely. If the number has been known for centuries as a symbol of defiance against God, why would it be so casually displayed? Beyond its appearance in logos and advertisements, the philosophy that underlies this number is even more concerning. In Scripture, 666 is not just a random number. It is the mark of a system, a way of thinking, a kingdom that opposes the divine order. It is the numerical representation of humanity's attempt to elevate itself above God, to establish its own dominion apart from Him. It is the number of man repeated 3 times, a counterfeit trinity, a mockery of the divine. And what does modern culture promote, if not this very idea? The obsession with self-exaltation, the rejection of absolute truth, the push for a world without moral accountability. These are not new ideas, but echoes of the ancient rebellion that has existed since the beginning. The enemy does not need to create a new deception. He only needs to repackage the old one in a form that people will readily accept. Thus, the use of 666 in corporate imagery is not simply an aesthetic choice. It is a declaration. Whether knowingly or unknowingly, those who incorporate it into their branding are aligning themselves with an ideology that seeks to dethrone God and enthrone man. This is not to say that every individual working in these industries is consciously aware of the significance of this number, but the spirit behind it is unmistakable. The world is being conditioned to accept a system that opposes the truth, a system that promises power, prosperity, and progress, but ultimately leads to bondage. And like all deceptions, it does not present itself as a threat, but as an opportunity. An opportunity to buy, to sell, to belong. The number of rebellion is not just a symbol, it is an invitation. And the question each person must ask is whether they are willing to accept it. The world is not as simple as it seems. What we often dismiss as mere coincidence, creativity, or corporate branding may in fact be part of a larger tapestry, one that has been woven for generations by forces beyond what the eye can see. Symbols, numbers, and imagery are not neutral. They carry weight, meaning, and history. And while some may argue that such things are trivial, history tells us otherwise. No empire, no movement, no ideology has ever risen without its banners, its emblems, its marks. To assume that today is any different is to ignore the lessons of the past. But this is not a call to paranoia. It is not a summons to see darkness in every logo or to fear every brand. Rather, it is a call to discernment, to open one's eyes to the realities that so often go unnoticed. The enemy does not need to announce himself with horns and fire. He works best in whispers, in subtleties, in the things we are conditioned to accept without question. He does not need to demand allegiance. He only needs to ensure that we are too distracted, too entertained, or too indifferent to recognize what is unfolding before us. And so we must ask ourselves, whom do we serve? Under what banner do we stand? For there is no neutrality in this war of symbols and meanings. Every mark belongs to a kingdom, and every kingdom has a ruler. If we are not actively aligning ourselves with truth, we will, by default, be swept into deception. The world is quick to offer its signs, its marks, its ways of thinking, but we must be quicker to recognize them for what they are. In the end, the great deception will not come with chains and force, but with comfort and familiarity. It will not demand, it will invite. And those who do not stand firm in truth will find themselves carried away not by an obvious evil, but by a carefully veiled lie. The question is not whether we see the signs, but whether we choose to heed them. Let us not be blind. Let us not be indifferent. For what is at stake is not merely our perception, but our very souls.